I feel like I wanted to make the Red Dead journal, but I feel like I need something. I need what it's called.
I got a plan. This is a good one.
Hi there, my name is Flav and welcome back to Dream It Model It. Today I'm going to show you how I made the Red Dead Redemption 2 journal. In this journal there are all the entries possible from the game, like the animals, including the legendary ones, the flora, the points of interest, the side missions, and of course all the main story events from both Arthur and John. And now some fun facts about this journal. In total there are 606 pages. I use 200 tracing paper pages. This journal weighs 1.5 kilos. I haven't worked every day since, but I started this project on last November, and only now, in mid to late February, I'm getting this big boy done. So it took me around 4 months or so to get everything completely ready. In this video I'm not only going to show you how I made the drawings, but also how I made the actual book. As you may know, a book of this size and dimension isn't very common to find in any store, so I decided that the best approach was to make one book from scratch. I thought to myself, if I was going to make this journal, might as well get it 100% handmade. So like I was saying before, in this video I'm not only going to show you how I made the drawings, but also how I sew all the pages together from this journal, and how I made this book cover from genuine leather. So without any further ado, let's see how I created this journal. To create the pages for the journal, first I stacked 5 A4 sheets, creating what is called a set. Then I bent them, aligning both the top and the bottom edges. This method later helps to sew up together all the pages. Before starting to sew the pages, I first had to mark where the sewing points should be. After watching some tutorial videos, the best method is to mark 6 points with the same distance between them. This allows for a stronger and tighter sewing connection. The actual sewing is pretty straightforward. I made 3 knots, making sure the knots were bigger than the diameter of the needle. This size difference between the knots and the needle works like a stopper, and allows you to actually start sewing. If the size of the knot isn't right, the needle just goes through the hole and you can never actually start sewing. From this point on, it's basically just following the previous marked sewing points and make sure that the needle goes in a different direction every time it goes through the pages. When the last mark was met, I tied 2 knots. The first one went through the last marks, and then I made a lace with the needle between the 2 previous marks. Then I repeated the same process to create a second knot. Just 1 knot will suffice, but to double check and make sure the sewing is strong enough, it's recommended to tie 2 knots. And there it was, the first set of pages sewed together. Now I just need to repeat the same process for 28 times. Once all the 28 sets were done, it was time to sew them together. Here the process is mainly about making knots to secure the set of pages all together. In the video I am showing you the process with just 2 sets, so it's easier to understand the process, and then it's just repeating this method for the number of sets you need. Now moving on to making the cover. Before using the real leather first, I started making the measurements in a piece of spare synthetic suede, just in case something was off. I didn't want to ruin the leather. Basically, the width of the journal cover is divided into 5 sections. The first and the last section are the length needed to cover up the edges, which is 15 mm on each side. The second and the fourth sections are the front and the back width of the cover, which is the same length as the page of the journal, which is 150 mm. The third section is the spine of the book, that measures 65 mm. Regarding the height, the journal is divided into 3 sections. Just like in the width, the first and the third sections are the length used to cover up the edges. The mid section is the height of the pages, which is 210 millimeters. When the prototype of the cover was cut into the correct size, I tried it on the journal to see if the measurements were correct, and thankfully everything was okay. So it was time to move to the real leather. Using the same dimensions as mentioned before, I was able to cut the piece of leather with the right dimensions for the journal. To give a sturdier structure to the cover, I cut two pieces of cardboard, one for the front and the other for the back. Once they were done, I glued them to the cover. To cover up the edges, I used fabric glue and bent the excess leather. This gives a more realistic and accurate look to the entire journal. With the cover ready, the only thing left was to bring together the pages and the cover. For that, I started using a new A4 page and placed it on the cover of the journal. Then I bent it, aligning the top and the bottom edges. Once that process was done, I carefully placed it on the cover, aligning the edges and glued them together. The same process was made for the back of the journal. To create the leather strap and, for the lack of a better word, the lock, I cut two pieces of leather and glued them into the journal. To make the journal more visually appealing, both the front and the back of the journal were measured, so I could find the midpoint to glue each one of the pieces. I just didn't want to make it randomly. Now that the actual journal was all said and done, it was time to create the drawings. Just like in my previous renditions of creating the Uncharted and The Last of Us 2 journals, I used in-game footage to have the most accurate drawings possible. The process here is to take individual photos of all the pages and send them from the PS4 to my PC through an external drive. Once I have the photos in my PC, I start to arrange them. The main focus here is to align the drawings to the page and use the adjustment settings like the contrast and the brightness. When I think the drawing is ready, I send it to my printer and I print it using tracing paper. With the tracing paper, I just have to trace the drawing back to the page and repeat the process for all the rest of the drawings. For the drawings, I use regular shading pencils with a different level of carbon, according to what the drawing requires. And there you go, this was the entire process of creating this journal.